From Lagos to London. Written by Sam Adebanjo. Read by Abby Balfour. Dedication for my mother. Chapter 1. The Genesis. Sam, you have failed again. That was my father's voice after getting home with my report sheet. I hung my head in shame and embarrassment to take in everything he had to say to me. And after all had been said and all tears had been shed, I went to my room, with my shoulders sagging, head still low, away from the presence of my stepmother and my siblings who had witnessed everything. I am Sam, born and bred in Nigeria. Ours was a polygamous home, with my mother being the second wife and I, her first son, with an older sister and 3 more siblings from my mother's side. Stepmother had 4 kids as well, so we were 8 in number. Mother had been in London for a while working and sending money home. It was barely enough for such a large family, but it was something. I wasn't the brightest of all my siblings. As a matter of fact, academics was quite a challenge for me. Being the firstborn son in an African family didn't help, as I had lots of responsibilities on my young shoulders. As the Arole, heir, you are expected to carry on the mantle of the family business. In my case, it was to continue the custard production and several businesses which father was into. You cannot afford to be lazy, my father would caution. You are the man of the house. All this will be your responsibility after I'm gone. Statements like this and more sometimes made me dread the future. I was barely 12, with lots of responsibilities. When my friends were busy having fun, you would see me following my father everywhere he went. My childhood wasn't entirely rosy. It was tough. My siblings and I only have a few years in between us, and some of us just a few days. You can call my father a busy man. Not having my mother around at that age made things even more tough for me. Our level of communication was bad. It was during the time that there was no phone, and the only means of communicating was by letters. As a child, I wouldn't even know how to write a letter or how to post it. Sometimes when we would write the letter, it didn't even get delivered, and other times when we would send through someone going abroad, she might not even receive it. I sometimes wondered how people actually coped during those times, and times before then, when the means of communication was either by post or through birds. Imagine a world without a phone call. There was no Motorola or Nokia. Fast forward to the 1990s when one-to-one was introduced to the world. However, in those days, only the rich could afford a telephone in Nigeria. So communicating with someone at such a faraway place was almost impossible. We were just surviving and not at all privileged. 4 of us were in the boarding school, which my mother catered for with the money she made in London as a cleaner and care assistant. This was her first job because during those times, people who travelled from Africa to London didn't get much job opportunities. All they could do was either clean or work in healthcare. Luckily for us, one of my mother's friends could afford the phone and we had a chance to use it in communicating with her. Even this came with several challenges. I remember how we used to walk several houses down just to search for a good reception in order to speak with her. Another problem was finding a time convenient for both sides. I attended a decent boarding school, and with such an opportunity you are expected to be brighter than most. However, with me, this wasn't the case. Even with the boarding school that you are spending so much, there is no change? My father would lament bitterly after seeing my report sheet. There was a time during this period when all I did instead of reading was to carry the Bible. Being a Christian, I fell in love with God at a very early stage. I loved everything about God, the worship, the praises, the prayers. I had this thought and conviction that even if I didn't read, my God would come through for me. I didn't read in preparation for the exams. I thought God would do a miracle for me. Alas, I failed woefully. How shallow were my thoughts then? I guess the saying is true, that heaven helps those who help themselves. If I had prepared, I know God would have helped me. However, on this day, I failed terribly, to the extent of having to repeat the year. This is usually the norm in the African schools, especially in Nigeria. Though I'm not sure about the rest of the world, but repeating a class is a stigma on that person. It literally means that person is slow and very dumb. You see, when you're a senior, there's this respect that's automatically yours. Even if your juniors are older than you are, they will still respect you. That's the case in Nigeria. You'll be respected not because of your age, but because of your class. So imagine the case of a senior having to repeat the year. You are not posted to the next class, and the same set of people who had before respected you and called you senior several times now have to meet you in that same class. This is no longer the time of pride, but a time of humility. During this period, you dare not even talk in the class. You will suddenly be quiet. During break time, you dare not rush out of class, but wait till everyone is out before leaving. This is the period you want to be invisible. Terrible, right? No, it's a nightmare. And it was my nightmare. One which I thought I would wake up from, but never did. As if that wasn't enough, my younger sister, who was my junior, now became my classmate. I didn't think there could be anything else as disgraceful as that. I cried bitterly. My mother decided to visit during this time. When I saw her, I was very happy, and after hearing and seeing all that had happened, she made a decision which she shared with me one night. I'll change your school, so you won't have to suffer the embarrassment of repeating the same class. Oh, when I heard this, I was delighted. I knew my prayers had been answered. I soon began to count the date to when I would be writing the exam for the new school. I wrote the entry exam a few weeks later, and the result came out days after. That evening I remembered waiting expectantly for my mother's reaction as she held the paper in her hand. My excitement vanished when I saw the look of disappointment on her face as she read. Then she looked down at me. "You have failed again at this." Well, that was how I wasn't able to get into the school. And I had no choice than to repeat the year, and that was the plan before. I had to share the same class with my younger sister. I was no longer that cheerful boy I used to be. My friends had gone ahead of me. They had automatically become my seniors. That was probably the most embarrassing thing to happen to me as a child. Back then, walking around or swimming was one of my hobbies. After school had closed, I loved swimming in the deep rivers until one day when I almost drowned. On that fateful day, the school had just closed, and as usual, I went to swim. Thinking about it now, I wasn't sure if people were around at that time. The only thing on my mind then was the thought of cooling my body from the hot weather in Nigeria. Having removed my clothes, I jumped into the welcoming cold water. The coldness of the water immediately drained the heat and dirt that I had been carrying all day. That moment, every responsibility of being the firstborn son, the embarrassment of repeating a class, and all other worries plaguing my mind had vanished. It was just me and the water. I shut my eyes, listening to the sound of my breathing, and the birds in the sky until I realized the intensity of the water had increased and my swimming capability wasn't a match anymore. I felt like a force was trying to draw me into the water, but thank God, I pulled myself out. I survived. I took so many risks as a child that one would sometimes wonder where my parents were. During the school periods too, at break time, my friends and I would swim in the pond. There was a time I got really sick from swimming in dirty ponds. That fever only lasted a few days, as I had always been a healthy child. For many years, I envied some of my friends whose both parents were in Nigeria. I wished I had the chance to have my mother with me. Every day, I always longed for that opportunity to see her again, or perhaps to get to stay with her. Many times I would see other women and imagine them being my mother. Finally, 22nd of April 1995, my dream came true and I got the chance to go to London. Chapter 2. Coming to London. All the challenges that I faced were finally worth it. As I got to England, I almost thought I was no longer on Earth, but in paradise. The beautiful skyscrapers, the clean streets, the orderliness which people maintained, the beautiful cars, the traffic lights, and the constant electricity were not what I was used to in Africa. On the day I arrived, even the sky seemed more blue than it used to be in Nigeria. It was like heaven on earth. Soon I got settled and my mother put me in school. The name of the school was Lillian Baylis. At that time, I must say it was a terrible experience at the school. Before I left home that day, my mother gave a stern warning. "Whatever you do in England, we do not fight girls." I put this in my mind as I got to the school that day. I was supposed to be finishing year 10, but started from year 9 due to my inability to catch up with the rest of the students. I had thought everything would go smoothly with my schoolmates. I didn't have any reason to feel out of place until a young boy approached me as I walked along the school corridor. He couldn't have been younger than my youngest sister. "African boo-boo, go back to your country," he shouted. How rude! This statement drew many people's attention to me, and they began to laugh. It was very embarrassing. And that didn't sit too well with me. I wanted to do something about it, but I suddenly remembered what my mother had said. The irony of it all was there was no difference between how the boys treated me and how the girls did. Basically, the girls bullied me the most. Their slaps were harder, more painful, and more resounding. Soon, I began to have issues with what my mother had said. I had to fight back. Even though I wasn't proud of it, I did have some fights with girls back then. I made a couple of friends at school. One of them, Tunde, was a Nigerian. We got along quite well because he had a respectful and a decent culture. He wasn't the brightest either. He had his own clique, who he moved around with, but he also moved with some other people of different cultures. Now, we, Africans, were seen as boo-boos during this period. It was also the time when there was a rift between Jamaicans and Nigerians. In the school I attended back then, Jamaicans were much respected for their culture. Also, the reggae and ragga music was like popular music genre at that time. So it was commonplace seeing Africans dressed and acting like Jamaicans just to earn some kind of respect and to have a sense of belonging. Thankfully, with the invention of the Afrobeat, cultural embarrassment had finally become a thing of the past. Africans could finally lift their shoulders high. These days, it makes me happy when I see my children embracing their African culture, speaking in their accent comfortably and their friends knowing Afrobeat. Even though they are British, they're not ashamed of their culture. It wasn't like this during the time when I had got to London. I remembered somebody once challenged me of looking more Jamaican than African. This takes me back to the case of bullying. I remember Emo, a girl in my class back then. She was controlled by a group of Jamaican girls to bully me. It was such an irony that a girl was being bullied into bullying me. "Emo, stand up!" one of the girls would order her in the class, and she would stand up. Even if she was busy writing or busy doing some stuff, she must drop whatever she's doing and do as she's told. I remember a time when she was ordered to slap me. I had initially thought she would decline, but no. She came towards me, and before I could talk her out of it, a resounding slap hit me on the cheek. I think I heard a faint ringing which lasted 10 seconds in my ear. Everyone in the class burst into laughter, and there was nothing I could do. I knew Ema was helpless. She couldn't deny the girls. Besides, my mother had warned me never to beat girls. I thought the bullying would stop, but it didn't. Perhaps it was because I did nothing to fight back. It wasn't that I couldn't do anything, but I wanted to obey my mother, and on the other side, I felt pity for the girl, that she was being bullied into bullying me. A time came when I finally ran out of pity. That day, I took a bus as usual. Emo was there to kick me. I will not explain in detail what happened on the bus that day, but the summary of it was that I showed her that I am a boy and not some sissy girl. I let her realise that I am an African boy and you don't mess with me. I set her straight, and I'm very proud of it. Many years later, after we were done in school, I started college. I ran into Emo again. She saw me driving and approached me. "Hello, Sam. Is that your car?" she asked. "Yes, it is," I replied, putting the car to a halt and stepping out to have a decent talk with her. "Nice car," she replied, and before I knew it, she snatched my car keys and ran down the road. I had to run after her, pleading for her to give me the keys. I couldn't believe that Ema was still a bully 2 years later after we left school. She was still behaving the same way to me. I can only hope that by now she's no longer a bully. This is 2021. She's probably married now and heading to work every day. I still remember Tunde. Even though he got into fights a lot, he and I were good friends. He loved showing off with his crew, and this usually put him in lots of trouble. There was a teacher that once shouted, "Tunde, you are a disgrace." He and I always got into fights and constant disagreements. For some reason, the teachers protected me, probably because I was well brought up and with good manners and was never rude to any of them. In the school I attended, I used to hear of the Chinese Mafia, that they were a group of Chinese students, but I never had any encounter with them, not until one special day. On this particular day, I noticed some people were pouring water in balloons and bursting the balloons on unsuspecting, innocent people around. I didn't put much thought into it, so I kept doing my thing. I kept walking, but stopped as I heard a loud bang, and my clothes were completely soaked. With my anger building up in a clenched fist, I turned to look at the boy who had done this. He was laughing. He probably thought I wouldn't do a thing. Little did he know what I had in mind. Even though he was bigger than I was, I didn't care. I walked up to him and carried him up with the intention of throwing him against the floor. Immediately I touched him, the school froze, and all eyes were on me. While I was still wondering what could have happened, I saw a group of Chinese boys coming towards me with their hardened faces. "Oh, he's gonna get in so much trouble," I heard someone say. Slowly, I put down the boy I had carried, waiting to see what would happen. Just then, my Ghanaian African teacher called me, "Samuel, come here this minute." That was how I was saved by the teacher. It was later I got to know that the boys were part of the mafia. I learnt there was a time when they started a riot in the school and broke all the school windows. Yet the school couldn't get rid of them. If the teacher hadn't called me, I knew I would have been severely dealt with. From that day, I dreaded walking alone, and going home was a great difficulty. I was afraid that the gang would find me after school and finally have the chance to deal with me. I remember a boy who told me to meet him after school. I almost pissed my pants because I was really frightened. I thought I had upset him or somebody he knew. Many times when someone came for me, I went quiet. But when anyone punched me, they got punched back. It's as simple as that. I remember a time when I was somewhere in the assembly hall. I was lost in my thoughts when some of the kids came to me. "Sam, do you like girls?" one of them asked in an African accent, while the others giggled and laughed at me. I was not even aware of what this was all about. I knew they were probably teasing me. I knew if I had said yes, they would laugh even more. It was a tricky question, and I needed them to see that a girl was the last thing on my mind. My education is far more important. "No," I replied. "Do you like boys?" another asked. "Yes," I said, and I felt a push behind me. Soon everyone started pushing, and I was the only one in the middle. This made me wonder if I had said something wrong. Later, I realized this is England. There are some things you don't say, no matter how innocent you are. I was only trying to prove that my education mattered most. However, they had taken it the wrong way. I had several advances from girls. I remember one time when I was busy with my physical exercise, about 4 girls passed by, each giving me a sultry look as they strolled by. Another time I remembered was when a girl had come to sit on my lap. She was wearing a pair of tight shorts. "Oh, Lord, have mercy," I cried aloud in my mind, seeing she was going to put me in trouble. "Will you get off, please?" I asked politely. When I got to year 10, I realized I was missing out a lot with the girls. So I started enjoying their company. I loved being around them, hugging them, spending time with them. I even enjoyed a little cuddle, but no more than that. Every time I think of anything more, I always remember my parents' warning. "Girls are a distraction. Education is the focus." So, yeah, girls could hold my hands, that's fine, but nothing more than that. I remember an embarrassing yet funny incident that happened on Valentine's Day. Since I got to England, I've always seen February the 14th as a very special day. I was told it is a day when you buy flowers for somebody you like and when you can also ask them out. I never knew this back in Nigeria. So that day I was all prepared with my red rose that I needed to give this special girl. I've been eyeing her for some time now, but never had the confidence to approach her. That morning, when I saw her with her friend, I decided to do what I had to do. With my heart pounding really fast and my hands getting sweaty, I walked up to her and called her name. As she turned towards me, the flower and the card were already in my hands. She collected them at first, to my relief, but the relief didn't last as she said, "I don't want them." I watched her throw them in the bin, and up till today, I still wonder why she had done that. Could it be due to the way I had presented them? Anyway, later that day, I was in the canteen, busy going through the incident of that morning. A girl approached me. In her hands were the rose and the card. "I think these belong to you," she said, half smiling. "I picked it up from the bin," she added, trying hard to control her laughter. Everyone in the canteen had their attention on us, and I was already too embarrassed to even respond. "And by the way, sir," she said, "you gave someone this card with all this beautiful stuff you wrote in it, but I really like you." The laughter continued even louder than before. She laughed as well, throwing the card to someone who went through it, and the person passed it on before it finally got to me. I had actually written some good stuff in the card, as I really admired the girl it was meant for. That day was one of the most embarrassing moments I had in the school, and I couldn't wait to get home and be away from the shame. I had several encounters with girls. Some were embarrassing, like the one you just read about. Some were fun, and others ended badly. It's just one of those things you need as part of growing up as a man. I remember a time when we went for a cross-country walk with the school outside London. There I spotted a girl lying on the ground. She was breathless. I tried to stay with her and help her. That was when I got to know she had asthma. She was a Puerto Rican and very pretty. I helped her stand up and tried to get help. We found a house by the countryside, and luckily for us, the man of the house was able to help us. After she was fine, we went back to walking and we finished even though we came last, but it was worth it. I enjoyed her company a lot, and I was awarded by the school for helping the girl and for finishing the walk, for I was recognised as a hero. Chapter 3. My challenges, losses and wins. Bringing 4 children to the UK had a toll on my mother. There was a time we were forced out of our rented flat. We became homeless and we were given temporary accommodation by the local council. That time was hard on my mother, a single mother with 4 children in the UK, so she became frustrated. You could tell how she nagged sometimes and how she got angry on petty things. At the same time, we could see the fear in her eyes, the fear of what if we didn't succeed. She was afraid of what people back home would say if at the end of everything we had nothing to show for all her effort. To make things worse, some of the people she worked with always praised their children in front of her. Being a bachelor, I tried to stay in my lane without looking for trouble. However, I made sure to teach whoever troubled me a lesson of their life. This brings me to a memory of when I was travelling on a bus with my friend and some guy. The guy suddenly turned towards me. "Give me your phone card," he ordered. I was surprised. "It's not my card," I replied. But before I knew it, he gave me a big dirty punch in my head and hurriedly stepped off the bus. I later had to use painkillers for the rest of the day as the pain was so much. I wanted to follow him, but my friend pulled me back. "You don't need it, let him go," he had said. Now thinking about it, I'm glad I hadn't gone after him. I can only wonder what would have happened if I had. On my way to Ghana recently in 2021, while on British Airways, I watched a black movie, Blue Story, which made me realise our culture in London has cost many lives. I learnt a lot of lessons after school, from a teacher who once told me I would never really do well in life. From being bullied, to fighting back, to being saved by the bell, lots of things have really shaped me into being the man I am today. There's something about music that captured me right from growing up, and I knew that I would definitely do music. Mother wasn't in support of this. According to her, only drug dealers do music. At the same time, being an African boy, all your parents expect you to be is either a doctor, a lawyer, or an engineer. You can ask any African you see, and they'll tell you. Music helped me cope through so many things. It was my escape from all the challenges I faced as a teenager. When you are done with school, what would you like to be? One of my teachers once asked me in the presence of my mother. I replied, "A lawyer or a doctor." I said that to make my mother happy, so it was quite a surprise when the teacher turned to my mother. "Forget it. He can't be a doctor or a lawyer. He's not very bright. Just let him learn something that he can do with his hands." This upset my mother, and what happened next will be a story for another time. You can imagine how she must have felt. A mother who had put so much energy and money to bring her children down to the UK, despite all the pressure and critics. I was delighted when school ended. 2 years later, I got into college, where I met some real people who I could finally call my friends. To be honest, that was also the time I faced a new phase of life. I went through a new chapter of life's struggles and faced many racial discriminations. This was a common narrative within the Black community. I realized these are just normal life struggles. On this fateful day, I experienced what people call being in the wrong place at the wrong time. I was with a group of guys. We were hanging around and one of them was talking to a girl. The girl's boyfriend, who saw them together, got angry. The boyfriend approached one of the guys in our group who was talking to his girl, and they had a verbal confrontation. The same guy who was talking to his girl then took the boyfriend's phone and was walking away with it. Within minutes, the police had arrived. I guess the boyfriend must have called the police using other means. To cut a long story short, we were all arrested. Even though we weren't charged, I remember sitting in a holding cell for 8 hours. This was probably the longest 8 hours of my life. In my head, I was asking, God, why me? I went through so many things that I realized had cost me so much. Despite all the challenges I went through, I'm grateful. In spite of all these, my goal was to get my degree in order to make my mother proud. Yet I knew it wouldn't be easy. Along the line, I got introduced to nightclubs. I can remember my first night at the nightclub. I had gone with David, one of my friends. He was the one who introduced me to the clubbing life. I had fun dancing with pretty girls in the club. If there is no girl to dance with, there's no point in going. Basically, in my dictionary, you can only go to clubs to dance with girls. I didn't quite enjoy myself when I found no girls to dance with. I guess this new life got me so distracted. The only thing on my mind then was girls. So it was no surprise when I failed my repeat year of GCSEs. I failed woefully. So I had to write another, and I failed again. As a Christian, I was no longer involved. I had lost the fear of God that I once had. So I was just living the worldly life. All I cared about was to date girls and have fun. That was when I realized I had lost my faith. Eventually, I decided to try out another college. Seeing how most of my mates had gone ahead and I was still stuck at one point. I talked some sense into myself. Then I took a test which got me into the city college. I was certain that attending the college would help me focus. It was a great decision, as that was where I met my girlfriend, who helped me through the season of college. Anyway, that's an entirely different story for another day. I had the most interesting life when I got introduced to coming home late. Imagine an 18-year-old boy coming home at midnight with my mother telling me to go back to wherever I was coming from. Sometimes I would sleep in the car and other times at a friend's place. Eventually I decided to leave home. Then through the council I was put into temporary accommodation, a hostel, with the aim of getting my own flat. There was a time when I got into fights while defending my friends. It was at a club in East London, and someone had just punched one of my guys. "Who is this person?" I asked, getting ready to fight whoever it was. My friend took me to who the person was and I punched him. Immediately the guy dropped to the floor. Suddenly everyone, including the guy I defended, all left and I was alone. I got out of the club immediately, and I heard that someone had just been stabbed. I kept wondering that if I stayed in the club, would I have been the one to be stabbed? At that time, I felt like a hero for having defended my friend. It is actually funny how my friends, who were a lot bigger than I was at the time, kept putting me in the middle to deal with whoever they had issues with. I pretty much dealt with everyone troubling my friends. But a time came when I actually did some serious thinking. What if the whole incident happened the other way round? Would these people still see me as a hero? Do they really care about me, or just for the fact that I help them in times of trouble? What if I got beaten up while defending them? Would they still be my friends, or would they laugh at me and leave me? Luckily, all the times I played a hero worked out for me, and one day I had a strange dream. I saw myself in a queue, throwing matches at somebody. The dream made no sense to me during that time, until the evening came and my friends and I went out. One of my friends messed with a young boy. Little did he know that the boy's big brother had a gang. The boy brought all the guys who were all bigger than we were. They were all on motorbikes, and even though my friend apologized, he was immediately surrounded by these boys. One of my other friends, Chris, tried to stand up for him, but he was severely battered. My respect for Chris increased that day because no one could have taken that kind of beating. While I was grateful that no life was lost and no gun was involved, I kept wondering what could have happened if that was me. I knew that Chris had taken the beating for me because I was usually the one who always backs up for my friends. And if I had tried it that night, I would have landed in Chris's shoes. I remember Chris asking me, "Sam, where were you?" "I was there, Chris," I replied as I explained how one of my friends had told me to jump into the car so we could run the guys over, but the police came around and took over. I felt bad for Chris. "You're a real hero, Chris," I told him. "No one could have taken that beating." I cannot end this book without talking about this special day that I'll never forget. I was 18 years old and was on my way to college. There was this boy that loved hanging around our street in London, and each time he saw me, he was always trying to tick me off with the things he said. I didn't let it get to me though. He was just a little angry boy, or so I thought. However, on this day, he and his gang confronted me, threatening to beat me up. "You're just a little boy," I sputtered. "You can't do anything." Little did I know that he could do so much. Within a second, 5 of the boys had surrounded me and they began to throw punches at me. I was so angry, but I could do nothing as there were so many of them. "What's going on, Sam? Is that you?" I was able to recognize one of my auntie's voices, and soon as she spoke, all the boys ran away. But one stayed, so I kicked him. When I went to college, I told my guys. Later that day, as I was going home with my cousin, we met these boys again on our way. I guess they were angry because I kicked one of them, and I knew there was going to be so much trouble this time. Quickly, I told my cousin to go get help. I tried to scare them away by pretending to have something to fight with. Out of nowhere, something hit me right on the mouth, and I tasted blood. Till today, I don't know what it was that was thrown at me. It hit me right on the mouth, and they didn't stop. They threw bottles at me even as I started running. The blood was dripping fast from my mouth, and I ran into one of my friends' houses. Checking the mirror, I noticed all of my front teeth were sticking out, as my gum had split and had come forward like dentures. And I had used my hands to position my teeth properly, as painful as it was. I was taken in the ambulance to accident and emergency in the hospital. After my mother was alerted, when she got to know everything, she got very angry. Somehow she found out where the boys resided and got all of them arrested. Unfortunately, they were all underage and were all soon released. Even till today, when I look in the mirror, I see the scar and I remember every memory attached to it. Years later, I ran into one of the boys and he was able to recognize me. To my surprise, he apologized for everything and explained how the rest of his gang had ended up in prison, having messed up their lives. I forgave him wholeheartedly and I was happy as he had changed for the better. Though the doctor said that in 5 years there was a chance I would lose all my teeth after that accident, thanks be to God, I have all my teeth and my life, and for that, I'm grateful. After so many challenges, lots of fun, wrong choices, and many advances from women, thankfully, I met a beautiful godly woman, full of wisdom and strength, who is my wife and wonderful mother of my children, of whom I love dearly, and have also been married for over 13 years. I am an entrepreneur and a gospel artist. I realize this journey has helped me a lot in becoming a better person. I am a human who has made many mistakes and still learning to become a better me, but I'm grateful for how far I have come. This has been a testament to, regardless of what has been said by my teacher at school, by the grace of God, I've become and still am becoming a success. So, that's the story of the Nigerian boy that came to London. You will see some similarities between my journey and some Black American films. Sometimes most people wonder if those movies are real, if people do experience this kind of life. But these are the things that do go on. The girls, the fights, the nightclubs, people who lose their lives, people who get into constant trouble with the authorities, the life of fast money, deception, etc. The war between Jamaicans and Africans has been levelled out with the invention of the Afrobeats. Like I said, the house party, the black culture, racial discrimination, the fights, the story continues. I know that you can relate. When you read the story, you will see that many things have changed. London is a great place of opportunities, and I see better changes in the coming generation. Now, I'm a man in his early 40s, married, comfortable, and devoted to God. I've become a man who seeks integrity and who is fully determined not to have his vision stopped by any past mistakes or challenges. I'm forever grateful to my mother who gave me this opportunity to be a blessing to other people. I also finally got my degree in 2003 and graduated with honours, and dedicated it to my mother, which was one of my proudest days. Since then, I have also been able to support my parents individually, financially, and for me being able to do that has helped me to fulfill the role as a senior, of which I was unable to do properly when I was younger. The young boy is here. He is living and striving and thriving. They say what doesn't kill you only makes you stronger. Mine has been an interesting journey indeed. Big up to Stephen Lawrence, Damalola Taylor, and many of the lives that passed away through violence, gang violence, racism, or violence within young people through racial profiling. Whether you're black or from any other ethnic background, I dedicate this book to all the lives that have been lost. All those people that missed their way and all the people that have a story to tell. Big up to all the African kids that left their home country and came to London, UK to change their lives and their families' lives for the better, and doing the best that they can. Big up to all the girls and boys that have been through this journey and doing great things with their lives despite the challenges. I salute you. I dedicate this book to you.
My name is Sam Adebanjo. Thank you so much for reading my book From Lagos to London. I hope you enjoyed reading the book. Check out my other books on Amazon and Amazon Audible. Remain blessed. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.